Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jamie. We're so excited that you're here with us this evening. Our topic today is going to be healthy hormones. This is a huge and very complex topic. You have many hormones in your body, and so we're not able to focus on every single one. That would be hours worth of a lecture, and so we're going to try to narrow in on specific hormones that we typically do see clinically. Oftentimes most people are actually struggling with that can lead to other chronic inflammatory diseases in the body. So we're going to focus on just a few things. Like I said, though, there's many other things that we could go over. We're going to try to give you some key action steps that you can take in your lifestyle to help make these hormones happier and healthier. And so we're going to give you some of those key strategies to do. As always, when you have questions, please ask them. We want to make sure that you get the most out of these workshops. So you can drop your questions below. As we're going through the talk, we will be answering them. If we're not able to get through all the questions, we will actually be answering them even after the workshop is over. So please drop all the questions that you have below, and we will make sure that we do answer them for you. Also, share this workshop with other people. This is an awesome way to reach as many people as possible, people that may not even be local to our community that can come into our clinic. They still need to know this information and can still apply the things we're going to talk about in their lifestyle. So please share this with other people that you love and care about. It's just a great way to continue sharing the good news of health and wellness. I'm going to share my computer screen with you so we can get started with the information. And like I said, if you have questions, you can just drop them below. So today, like I said, the topic that we're going over is healthy hormones. This is a huge topic, and when we look at the endocrine system, there are many different hormones, but our main focus and why we want to talk about this system in particular is because literally we are completely living in a state where we are completely overwhelmed. And a lot of our hormone system, in particular the hormones that I'm going to talk about and focus on today, are directly related to our stress response in the body. So different things can actually cause stress, but what we actually do see, we literally are seeing autoimmune diseases, we're seeing leaky gut, we're seeing allergies and asthma. They are all on the rise. 1 in 5 people actually do have an autoimmune type of disease, and the majority of them actually are women. Over 40% of people just in the state of South Carolina report they get less than 6 hours of sleep. We are literally, we can't fall asleep. We can't stay asleep. A lot of people kind of describe this sense of overwhelm. They can't get their mind to shut off so that they can actually fall asleep, for one. But it's like they're wired, but they're tired. They know they need to sleep. They're exhausted, but they're just so wired from either the stress that they're living in, or even sometimes too the medications they're taking, or their lifestyle, the lack of exercise, the lack of good nutrition. 80 to 90% of doctor visits are actually related and due to stress. And according to the American Institute of Stress, this just came out in April of this year, over 70% of people are experiencing stress that not only affects their physical health and well-being, but directly does affect their mental health and well-being. So like I said, we're living in a state of overwhelm. We are completely stressed out. We are over-medicated. We are overweight. We're actually underfed. And so when we look at this state of overwhelm that the body is in, it's almost like our body is literally running kind of in this overdrive state. And so what we tend to see are high amounts of stress hormones, high amounts of inflammatory stress markers that show up in certain blood panels, saliva testing, urine samples that we look at. But again, what we're seeing are high amounts of lifestyle related stress. Literally, watching the stressful news, people are scared to death about the pandemic and different things, the riots, all this stuff that's going on. There's so much stress. And then on top of that, if you have children and you're worried about their health and their well-being, people are worried about their financial states. There are so many things that people are stressed about. Then on top of that, like I said, the nutrients, the foods, the toxins, things we're being exposed to, the body doesn't adapt to all the chemicals that we're actually being exposed to. And this creates an environmental type of stress that actually internally then creates the same kind of cascade through these hormones. So we've got to stop the madness. Part of this and what we talk about is functioning. It's just, that's what true health is. It's your body functioning at 100%. It's not just you feeling good all the time. The sad thing is, though, we see people every day. They've got actual symptoms of low thyroid, symptoms of adrenal fatigue and exhaustion, symptoms of brain fog, mid-belly, their waistline's too big, and so depression, anxiety, all these things. But unfortunately, in our medical system, a lot of times people too, even if they're getting the labs done, they're getting their thyroid checked, oftentimes they come back, oh, your labs are perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with you. But the reality is that when a person has symptoms like what I'm describing, there is something going on. And two, I'm going to kind of delve into that a little bit in a second. But the reality is they don't have anything different to offer you besides taking more drugs and medications, just trying to treat or cover up symptoms. We've got to get to the root cause of what's actually going on and start addressing the things that we can. And part of that is going to be taking key action steps in your own lifestyle. What's great about that is that you control that. You can choose to stop watching negative TV shows. You can choose to eat more fruits and vegetables. You can choose to take better quality supplements. And so that the body then can actually begin to heal and function better rather than just covering symptoms up or actually creating more symptoms even through a medical toxic model through drugs. And so this all begins in the brain, and there's key organs that I'm going to focus on today to kind of relate all this stuff together. But this operates it's kind of like a safety pin. The brain's going to communicate to these organs. Your organs are going to release certain hormones. Those hormones are then going to go back and act and talk back to the brain where this system that it should be regulated, right? Your body should function in a state of homeostasis. So when I talk about hormones, the goal and what I'm talking about is to not eat certain foods and take certain supplements to get rid of these hormones. You have them and you have them for a reason, but it's to make sure that things, for one, get triggered at the correct time, and meaning that the response is correct, but then also the body's actually functioning so you get the feedback so that the body can then balance and live in that state of homeostasis. So your brain, essentially neurologically, right, it sends signals through the spinal cord, through the nerve roots, actually tell your adrenal glands how to function. Your adrenal glands release several different hormones. In particular, what we're going to talk about today, we're going to focus a lot on cortisol and DHEA. It also does release, though, epinephrine, norepinephrine, aldosterone, and what's key, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but aldosterone actually controls the amount of salt in bodily fluids. So if you take high blood pressure pills, if you take fluid retention pills, okay, if you have a lot of cravings for salt, we oftentimes can see that even the aldosterone is going to be out of balance. But one of the key things we're going to talk about is cortisol. Cortisol is actually released in times of stress. Okay, so it is a normal function. It's a normal process that's supposed to happen. We talked about this even neurologically. Your nervous system has two different parts to it in essence, what we call fight or flight and rest and digest. So in a time of fight or flight, in a time of high stress, imagine a tiger running into the room. It's going to be more important for you to be able to stay and fight that threat or to actually turn around and run away. So it is not important in that moment for you neurologically and hormonally to be in a state of resting and digesting. You wouldn't want to just be sitting there taking a nap or eating a sandwich while the tiger's going to eat you and attack you, right? So that's what I mean about timing. So cortisol, when it actually does go up, it's typically released in a response to stress. It actually does help us break down fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. Again, all that are necessary in order to actually survive and thrive. You've got to eat those three things, okay? So it actually does help us break down those foods. But in particular, what cortisol actually does is that it actually will trigger the creation by triggering the liver it actually then triggers a rise in blood sugar. So your liver will begin to create new glucose. Obviously, as blood sugar goes up, the pancreas now then is going to be triggered to release more insulin. Okay, all of these things, we know that insulin, the job of insulin is to act on the cell. There are receptors on your cells so that it can draw that blood sugar out of your blood and put it into the cell to be utilized as energy. That's actually why it's doing this. Okay, so again, because, right, we want to stay and fight, or we want to turn around and run away, we're going to need sugar to be a fuel source for a very quick what the body hopes is a short-term stress reaction. So cortisol is not meant to, though, be high all the time. And so what happens is, this is what we typically do see, is that people are in chronic states of stress, literally mental stress, where they are worried. They're worried about their finances. They're worried about their children. They're worried about their parents, taking care of their parents with the diseases and the aging that they have going on. They're worried about themselves with pandemics and riots. We have all these things that create stress. Even literally the things you watch on television will elicit these hormones. Okay, so, and then too, we don't sleep, we don't exercise. All of these things kind of lead into this catabolic nature. And what cortisol actually does is, it actually, when it's high for long periods of time, it has a direct response on your immune system, your musculoskeletal system, and a lot of these other organs that I'm talking about. And so what happens is that when you have high amounts of blood sugar and it's constantly being released, and you constantly then have a rise in insulin, your cells literally, they get burnt out, they get congested, they get inflamed. So no longer can the cell open up to respond to insulin. So then you begin to have what's called insulin resistance. High cortisol, or cortisol being released at the wrong time, plus insulin resistance, leads to you having a large waistline, where you have an accumulation of fat, primarily around the waistline of your pants. It can lead to brain fog, hair loss, fatigue, anxiety, depression, that kind of constant state of, you feel wired, but you are tired, you're exhausted. Sometimes people, they can fall asleep, but they're waking up like in the middle of the night, and then they can't go back to sleep for hours. That's usually a big sign that your cortisol levels are spiking at the wrong times, because and then interestingly enough, cortisol actually acts on your melatonin. Okay, so all of these responses then, right, I told you it's kind of like a safety pin cycle. They're going to go back to the brain, and they're actually going to trigger some of these same pathways that then have to tell other organs like your thyroid how to work. Okay, so the job of your thyroid, if you just, in a simple explanation, want to think that it's to actually control your metabolism, basically, right? So if your thyroid is hyperactive, you're going to be burning, your metabolism is going to be just on overdrive. These people tend to be skinny, they have bulging eyeballs, or people that their thyroid is slow and sluggish tend to be overweight, and they're going to have oftentimes these other adrenal things actually going on. Now, what's interesting is that I kind of said this earlier, but we talk to a lot of people and be like, well, I've had my thyroid checked and they tell me everything's fine. They tell me my labs are normal. The reality, I'm going to be honest with you, is that they don't even do a full panel. And the reason why is because their recommendations for you in a typical medical model isn't going to change. It doesn't matter if you have thyroid cancer. It doesn't matter if you have follicles, growing on your thyroid. It doesn't even matter if you have autoimmune Hashimoto's, which honestly 90% of the time is actually the issue with your thyroid. It's not even your thyroid. It's your immune system that's not functioning correctly. Okay, but they typically don't even test a full panel. When I ask people, well, what did they test? What did they tell you? Typically, they only look at TSH, okay? And that is the signal, the brain, TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so the brain releases this to act on the thyroid to then release T4, which then gets converted to T3, You then also have reverse T3, and they don't hardly ever look at any of these other parts of the thyroid and how it's functioning. The reason why is because, again, looking at all these other pathways, usually at the same time, this person is going to have an adrenal issue that's going on, with cortisol being out of balance, aldosterone being out of balance, DHEA, which is the precursor to your estrogen and testosterone. These things are going to be out of balance. So actually what happens is your brain is still telling your thyroid, it's still producing TSH. So of course it shows up normal, but then the thyroid itself is not actually producing the right amount of T4, T3, or even RT3. Okay, so there's another thing too. When you look more at what a functional medicine practitioner like myself, Dr. Granger, when we look at lab results, this is really key too with vitamin D. There's a big difference between what's considered normal, like a standard range, and what's considered optimal. Okay, so we don't want to be in this. When you look at either end of the timeline here, or whatever you want to look at it, the ranges, excuse me, the disease is on either end, right? I talked about the thyroid. Hyperthyroidism is a disease process where the thyroid is overproducing. If it's sluggish, there's also that disease process, right? So there's a standard range of what's considered normal, but what we really want to be is in the optimal range. It's just like your vitamin D levels. Most people are deficient in vitamin D, but same thing. We get people come back all the time. They go, oh, my vitamin D levels are perfectly normal, but you still have all these other warning signs and symptoms of things that are metabolically not correct in the body. And that's why, yes, these tests are important, but for one, we've got to make sure we're doing the right tests, that we're getting full panels done, full information, and that we're actually utilizing the information correctly. And so that's the difference, is that, like I said, it really doesn't matter in a medical model, because the treatment's always going to be the same. They're going to treat your symptoms, and they're going to treat them with medication. They don't actually really look at what the overall triggers and cause are. Okay, so when this leads to cellular congestion, it leads to inflammation, and I'm sure you know this and you've heard this before, but inflammation is the root cause of every underlying disease, whether it be cancer, whether it be diabetes, decreased immune function, problems with reproduction. And so again, one of the best ways that we can combat this, certain action steps we need to take, you have got to sleep. Sleeping 7 to 8 hours is crucial. We need to reduce stress. We've got to get our minds, out of this negative cycle of watching negative news programs that literally are telling you nothing good. There is no good news on the news. It's all just about death and chaos, and it's so stress-inducing. And especially if you watch that before you go to sleep, what happens is you don't realize you're actually can be spiking your cortisol. The normal rhythm of cortisol is actually for it to be high in the morning, and then it gradually tapers off throughout the day and should be the lowest right around midnight when you're getting into that deeper sleep pattern. But a lot of people, that's not what's happening, because they're so stressed, and the stress cycle doesn't stop. But then we're eating bad foods that create more internal stress, digestive stress. They're being exposed to toxins, and then they're watching stressful things on TV before they go to bed. The cortisol can actually get spiked. That triggers what I was talking about, that wired but tired, or you're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you can't go back to sleep for 3 hours, or you're waking up at 5 a.m. Maybe you get the 7 to 8 hours, but you're exhausted. You have chronic fatigue. This is definitely something we see in people that have chronic fatigue, that have fibromyalgia, because these complex body responses, again, when the hormone system is out of balance, it's going to create these widespread things that go on. Two, I'm not going to go back to that slide, but one of the other things that I said earlier was how cortisol actually affects your immune system. So when it's high chronically, it actually then weakens your immune system. It also has a catabolic effect to your bone and muscle. It literally can actually cause osteoporosis, osteopenia, the destruction of muscle tissue, which can lead to joint pain. Other things as well, like I said, hair loss, brain fog, fatigue, weight loss resistance, because this is another huge myth, is that we're still being told today, just lower your calories, lower your fat, do cardiovascular work, and you'll lose weight. And that's couldn't be anything further from the truth. What actually triggers high amounts of cortisol long term and insulin resistance, leptin resistance, is low calorie starvation types of diets. This is also why your thyroid doesn't function correctly either, because when you're actually starving the body and you're trying to alter the metabolism, the thyroid's still producing, or excuse me, the brain's still producing that thyroid stimulating hormone, but then it actually leads to a slow, sluggish thyroid with levels of T3, because your cells are actually congested and inflamed, and they can't even allow the T3 to get inside to activate your metabolism. And so part of this, when you have cravings for salt, you have cravings for sugar, yo-yo dieting, you just have these intense cravings you can't seem to get over. These are usually big warning signs that something is going on with our adrenals, your cortisol levels, and then internally, yes, even the thyroid itself. All of this plays together. So we've got to, we have to sleep. We've got to reduce the stress in our life. We've definitely got to move. We've got to have exercise. Some of the key things about high intensity exercise is they've actually shown that it actually does help to trigger the response of DHEA. Now, DHEA is the precursor to testosterone in men, to estrogen in women. Now, what's interesting is that one of the classic symptoms you would have if you have low testosterone is depression, anxiety, again, weight around the belly. Men, because what will happen is it actually starts to convert to estradiol. Men actually start to have female characteristics in their body. They begin to grow breast tissue. Their tummy belly gets big, almost like as if they were pregnant. Okay, so those are, again, key signs that the adrenal response is not functioning correctly. So, and part of that is going to be cleaning up the lifestyle, okay? Exercise, high intensity exercise, reducing stress, sleeping. The next focus has to be on the gut. Almost 80% of your immune system is located in the gut. So if you have bloating, gas, diarrhea, irritable bowel, Crohn's, if you've actually been diagnosed with a digestive disorder, we know the gut isn't healthy. If you have leaky gut symptoms, and that we just know that the brain's going to constantly, because the gut's going to be leaking different irritants into the immune system, and it's going to be triggering high inflammation. And then again, it just creates this cascade with all these hormones that we're actually talking about. Now, in our clinic, we do food sensitivity testing because absolutely you need to eat whole foods. Yes, you need to eat more leafy greens and vegetables. Your carbohydrates should be coming from vegetables instead of fruit on a primary basis. You need to decrease fructose, quit eating loads of sugar and bad fats. But also, too, what's really key about having a food sensitivity test is really understanding if you're eating foods that your body might be reacting to, if you're actually triggering inflammation by eating certain foods. And these are foods, honestly, that people actually, that are healthy. You could be reactive to almonds, and I could not. So we're all unique in how we're going to respond to certain foods. But having really getting that test has been crucial. I've had people literally, actually, too, just by getting their food sensitivity tested, removing foods from their diet, sometimes only for a short period of time, allows the gut to de-inflame and start healing. But actually had people literally be able to reduce their medications that they're on because they actually started addressing the cause of the problem. And in particular, when I mentioned that almost 90% of the time with a thyroid imbalance is actually due to an autoimmune imbalance called Hashimoto's. And they don't hardly ever test to see if you actually have the antibodies affecting your thyroid. They just simply do a one basic test looking at your TSH. We have to get a full panel to really know what's going on. So again, the issue wouldn't be your thyroid. The issue is your immune system. And one of the primary places that we've got to start is cleaning up not just the diet, but cleaning up the gut to make sure that it's functioning correctly. That reduces inflammation and allows your immune system and all these other organs, tissues, and glands to function better too. Yes, are there key supplements that we need to be taking? Probiotics, absolutely. With the amount of toxins we're being exposed to in our food, let alone our environment, our guts are completely wrecked. And the body doesn't know how to adapt to all these chemicals that are in the food. And that's why eating whole foods is necessary. Eating real things. Don't eat things out of a package or a box because those things really aren't real foods. They were made in a lab. They're chemically derived. Also, too, that's why food companies, that's why they hire scientists to actually formulate their foods, because they know how to make those things taste so that you want more of them. So that's, everybody knows this when they eat diet foods, low-calorie foods. Those things don't taste good, so they add sugar, they add salt because, again, you're going to begin to have those cravings when you're seeing these different hormone imbalances. Taking things like vitamin D3, for one, making sure your levels are in optimal ranges. Even here at the beach, almost 90% of the people that we have tested or we read their lab results, they are deficient in D. And again, like I said, there's a big difference between being in a standard range and being in an optimal range. Those are the things I want, right? I want for myself, I want for my children and my family. I want to have optimal health and well-being. I don't want to just be like everybody else, because the reality is, honestly, the majority of people are sick. So we want to be in optimal levels when we look at these things. Again, another key nutrient is magnesium. It is very hard to get. You could even eat the best organic fruits and vegetables, and it is very hard to get magnesium because, again, our food is so depleted. That's one of the key nutrients that we supplement-wise at the office that we have. And a lot of people see a big difference, not just in digestive, but what they really get a big response in is stress, relaxation, pain reduction, because magnesium is really a lot like vitamin D. It acts on over 200 physiological processes in the body. So how your heart functions, your immune system, your joints, your musculoskeletal health, your digestive system, your nervous system. It's a key nutrient that's involved in all of those processes. And omega, so essentially your good healthy fats. So we talk about eating more healthy fat because a lot of people don't understand what's so amazing and so important about fat, that it is the basis of all your hormones. When you starve yourself and you do a low-calorie, low-fat diet, which is what almost everybody's teaching you, it doesn't work. And these people wind up, they might lose a certain amount of weight, but they hit huge walls in their weight loss, so they can no longer lose weight. They're what is called weight loss resistance. They have intense cravings. They're still losing their hair. They still have bad skin. They're still aging because when you cut fat out, oftentimes what you wind up replacing it with is more sugar, which is definitely an issue. But fat in itself, good, healthy fats are actually essential. And so this is key, is that the body, it's an essential nutrient, meaning the body actually needs it, okay? There is no such thing as a non-essential fat. So we need healthy fats in order to store hormones, or actually increase the production of hormones. help balance your cholesterol and triglyceride levels. Okay, it's good for heart health, to reduce your blood pressure. And your brain is mostly composed of fat. So we know that we need it for our brain health. When people supplement with quality omegas, good healthy fats, and they increase the fat in their diet, good healthy fats like nuts and seeds, avocado, coconut oil, things like that, we know that they have less brain fog. We know and have seen through research and studies there's less depression, there's less anxiety. They actually lose weight by eating more fat. And that's the exact opposite of what you're told. I still have people today telling me that their doctor is telling them that coconut oil is clogging their arteries. That's not how it works, okay? It's because your body is inflamed. And when you have inflammation, your arteries, yes, they're going to be scarred. Your blood pressure will go up. The issue is inflammation. It's not eating a spoonful of coconut oil. Okay, so again, these principles, when we're really looking at how the body functions, how it operates, how it heals, it has to have these essential nutrients, vitamins, and minerals in order to do that. Yes, should we be eating more healthy foods? Absolutely. Do we need to get rid of toxins in our food and our environment? Absolutely. Sometimes, though, that's the whole purpose of a supplement, is that we've got to supplement on top of making some of these other lifestyle choices. Tell people is that you've got to make sure when you're actually taking supplements that these are coming from a good source. You don't want to just go buy fish oil off a big box store shelf. That stuff is not clean. It's full, oftentimes actually full of sugar when you read the label, but it's full of other stuff that actually just creates the same process of inflammation and disease building over time. And so there's no point in wasting your time or your money taking something that's actually just causing another issue. But one of the first steps is really, we've got to start somewhere. This can be very overwhelming, especially when we look at the thyroid, when we look at the adrenals, and what I typically see where a lot of people, especially in the thyroid, for one, because they're not even doing a full panel on you. Honestly, I've been there myself. I've actually asked for a full panel and been told no. Okay, so I know that even if you ask, sometimes you're not going to get actually what you need. And so when we look at this, though, we've got to make sure that, for one, we're doing the right test so that we're actually looking at the key things that we need to do to, I guess I would say, treat, and then not just cover up the symptoms. And so when we, again, food sensitivity testing is one place I tell people that we should really start. Let's make sure you're actually eating the right foods for you, for your immune system, that are not going to create more inflammation, but are actually going to reduce inflammation. And these are all tests that we do in our clinic. It's just a simple little finger prick, a blood analysis looking at the sensitivities to multiple different foods, dairy, gluten, different fruits and vegetables. So that we get a good idea of what you should or should not be eating, so that we can actually get the gut to heal, which decreases inflammation, then making sure we're taking key nutrients and supplements to, again, reduce inflammation and get the body also to be able to heal. Working on our stress. Make sure you're exercising, that you're drinking water, and that you're actually sleeping. All of these things are crucial, especially when we talk about hormones and having happy, healthy hormones. And so, in a big picture, that's why we want to make sure the body is, we talk about function. That's why we talk about those different things. It's not just about covering up symptoms. Again, I want to, thank you guys so much, for being here. Like I said, I know that it can be very overwhelming. I covered a lot of information, covered it actually very quickly. And so there's always going to be more questions. Again, I want you to take the action steps to ask the questions so that we can help point you in the right direction, whether that's, you've had the lab testing done and, just looking at it. Whatever it is, we want to make sure that we're serving you and giving you what you need so that you can continue being healthy and well. That's the whole point. And so, again, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. Stay tuned for the next workshop that we'll be doing next month. Just keep bringing you guys tools, strategies, and tips towards just literally living a life the way that God intended it, healthy and happy. I am Dr. Jamie Granger with True Health Chiropractic. I want to say if you have any questions, please drop them below in the comments section, and we look forward to seeing you guys on the next workshop.